Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For the next half hour, our topic of conversation is going to be all about divorce, what you need to know if you know somebody that maybe is going in the middle of that right now or has in the past and needs some, maybe some good legal advice. Tonight is the opportunity to get that. You may want to give them a call and let them know that is our topic of conversation tonight. A couple of neat things about the way this show is done. At the bottom of the screen, all throughout the program, are ways you can join our conversation. We love hearing from you. And attorneys from Hollis Wright will be standing by all throughout the program tonight. Opportunity for you to pick up the phone, give them a call, speak to an actual attorney. That conversation takes place off the air. So if you, during the course of the program, a question pops into mind and you need some legal advice, you can get that right now from the attorneys at Hollis Wright. Driving our ship, we get to say hello to Josh Wright, managing partner of the firm Hollis Wright. Good to see you, sir. You doing all right?
You too. You know, you can't state it any better how we have live lawyers here for calls, texts, and emails at the top of the show. Good job.
Thank you very much, sir. All throughout the half hour, right?
No question. You know, and this is something we've done for 6-7 years, and people sometimes test us. They question, you know, is a live lawyer actually going to be there to answer this call, this text, this email, the Facebook post, the Twitter post? We're there to do that, and it's our way to give back to the community and hopefully provide some good legal advice.
I think you do.
Tonight, we're addressing a topic, David, that unfortunately affects a lot of the viewing audience, and that's the issues and kind of developing trends in the area of divorce. So we're going to talk about that tonight. If there are folks out there on their couch that are in the middle of a good or a bad divorce, a contested or a non-contested divorce, or are thinking about divorce, hopefully we'll be able to provide some insight today to talk a little bit about and lead, guide, and direct people through that process just a bit. We're lucky tonight because we're joined by Jamie Reel with the law firm of Myers and Dixon here in town. First of all, welcome to the show and thank you for coming to talk about this topic.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. How did you get into, first tell us a little bit about your firm and then tell me how you kind of got into this area of the law, because this is a specialty that not every lawyer is able to prosecute and handle.
Well, the firm of Myers and Dixon is a general practice firm, so that means that we handle a wide variety of cases. And sadly enough, a lot of the cases that the highest volume of the cases that we deal with generally do deal with family law. So because of that, it's kind of where our practice has steered, and we're more than happy to help people out doing that.
Gotcha. And so you are kind of a specialist in a lot of different areas. I know we talked before we started the show, but this is kind of one of those areas that you help folks understand the areas and developing trends in the divorce world? Yes.
Primarily, we do help out a lot of people with visitation stuff. You know, the divorce is generally just the beginning of it all. Issues can arise 5 years down the road, and they need to be readdressed at that point. And a lot of times it ends up dealing with custody, visitation, even some alimony or child support. People just have problems with that, and it doesn't matter when it happens.
Let's talk, because I know when we do these shows on divorce, and we've done these before, we get questions a lot of times related to contested versus uncontested. And I have clients of mine that often call and say, look, you know, unfortunately, we're at a position where we think we need to go through a divorce. Can you get us to a lawyer that handles that? I think we're going to be able to do this, and we're not going to contest each other. Contested divorce, though, is going to be a divorce where what? Folks are going to have something, whether it's a visitation, child, or money issues at issue?
Yeah, contested divorce, generally there's going to be a difference of opinion as far as how visitation, custody, decisions to be made with the child and their life growing up, school, things like that. A contested divorce, the judge and the court are going to hear both parties and determine the best interest of the child at that point.
And so in an uncontested divorce, do we see a lot of those? I mean, are there a lot of where, you know, you see these billboards out there where somebody can go in for a small amount of money and file an uncontested divorce? What actually equals an uncontested divorce? Are you literally just content where you don't have marital assets and you're just moving and separating from each other legally?
Most of the time in an uncontested divorce, the parties to get everything done faster, they decide to just get together, put their heads together, figure out a way to go through everything in a way that's less painful.
Gotcha.
And in that case, that's generally just coming to an understanding and working together, and it makes it easier for everybody to get to that point.
Let me ask the both of you, and Josh, I'll start with you here. When it comes to family matters and children, there's so much emotion involved with this subject matter. How often is it kind of you all's top claim and kind of top concern just to get everybody to kind of take the emotion out of it and look at what is the best thing to do, what is the right thing to do, and kind of help folks, almost counsel them to think clearly and remove emotion?
You know, from a lawyer's perspective, I often tell clients, I mean, because think about this, you know, in a lot of the cases we handle, which are not divorce-related cases, like Jamie may handle, we're handling estate-related issues where there's an unfortunate loss of life in a family, and the question becomes who's going to control the decisions, who's going to control the estate, who's going to file that lawsuit. And so a lot of times that's emotionally charged, as you can imagine, because you got, I mean, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, you have family members that have really strong opinions about who should be in charge. A lot of people unfortunately pass away for better or for worse without a will. And so the law in those circumstances dictates generally who covers those things. So there are a lot of emotional related issues in that. I advise our clients a lot of times in those cases, David, that, you know, as your lawyer, my goal is to separate the business components of this case from the emotion. There'll be time for emotion down the road, but let's manage and handle the business-related issues. When we come back, I want to hear the answer from Jamie, too, because I know on the divorce side, it's probably even more emotional than we see on the death side.
Yeah, Jamie, we'll pick up right there. We'll step aside our first break of the evening. As we do so, a couple of reminders. Here's how you can get in touch with us here. Also, don't forget those attorneys standing by. And the firm of Hollis Wright on Facebook as well as Twitter, really active Facebook community. So you're going to want to like the page there. Just search the term Hollis Wright to find them there on Facebook. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Appreciate you being with us tonight. A reminder, ways you can join the program at the bottom of the screen all throughout the night. Here, continuing our conversation. Josh, let me ask you, this is one of those questions and one of those topics that's probably going to spur a lot of questions and concern and feedback. This is really a perfect time for attorneys from Hollis Wright to be standing by. Topics like this, right?
No question. Yeah, I mean, and you know, this issue that we addressed before the break about emotion, I want to hear Jamie's side because I know in the divorce context he hears it. But you know, This is a good example, David, of a lot of times we'll get calls or texts or emails during the show and say, look, I'm not sure my lawyer's doing a great job. He seems to have no emotion related to the way he's litigating the case. And we've got to talk people, not off the ledge, but kind of explain to them in context, hey, look, there's a business side. You hired a lawyer to handle and manage the business side of this case. There will be time when you get to trial, you get to a hearing, where you'll see the emotion from that lawyer, but you've got to manage the details of that business side of the claim, whatever it is, whether it's a car accident case, a wrongful death case, or a divorce, and manage those details. And the lawyer sometimes can pull some emotion out of that, manage those things, and then the emotion comes later when you go to hearings and whatnot. So Jamie, talk just a little bit about, I know you see that a lot in your practice with reference to just divorce cases in general.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion involved. Obviously, you're dealing with situations where families are falling apart, and it's not exactly the easiest thing to go through for anybody, even the attorney being there. So the best way to deal with it is to just kind of hear everybody's side of the story and take what it is and try to kind of, as much as you can, remove the emotion out of it, so that the client understands that they are making the best decision possible moving forward.
Yeah. Let's talk for a minute about marital assets. I know there's confusion. Sometimes people come to a marriage without a prenuptial agreement, and they come to a marriage with certain assets that they had to start with, and then there are assets that are created among the couple moving forward. How does all that marital asset issue work?
Well, generally, what you're talking about is separate property and marital property. So property that you're going to accumulate during the marriage is going to be something that's called marital property, and generally that's going to be what's divided up by the court. Separate property is property that you may have had before you got married, or something that's been with you your whole life. That can be anywhere from will, something that you get passed down through a will, maybe some property, things like that. But generally the court and the divorce decrees, they're going to end up distributing the marital property and not the separate property.
So, and a lot of times I know that you run into this in your practice, there are children involved in these circumstances where the court has to decide how custody and how support is going to be handled and managed. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is.
All right, talk to me, because I know we get this question a lot. What happens if for job circumstances or for other reasons there are custody-related issues or there are support-related issues, and one of the spouses who's now divorced has responsibility for a child but needs to move out of state, for example, for a job or for a new relationship? How does the court generally manage that stuff?
Well, Alabama is actually one of the few states at this point that actually has a statute or a law on the books that handles this. It's called the Alabama Child Parent Protection, or the Alabama Parent-Child Relationship Protection Act.
Easy for you to say.
Right.
That's a tough one. Yeah.
So what that act does is you must give notice to the other party, the non-moving party, that you're going to move. In that situation, it ends up giving that parent the opportunity to object, or to at least be aware of the fact that the child is being moved out of state. That rule applies to any move that's over 60 miles, and it applies in-state and out-of-state. But the parents do have an ongoing obligation to any other non-custodial parent to update them about information such as a phone number, any address change, even if that's within the 60-mile radius. And again, that parent, if they have a problem with that move, they have 30 days to object. They file a petition in the court, and they can either get a temporary or permanent restraint on that move.
Yeah, and one of the things you see, David, in these cases is the court is involved not just at the time of the initial filing, but the court a lot of times is involved all the way until a child reaches a certain age, in order to make sure that the best interest of that child is monitored and protected.
A question we've got here is about how it is decided what is a fair distribution of property or finances or whatever. Is there a system involved there, some sort of process, or how is that determined who gets what in a divorce proceeding?
Well, Alabama is an equitable distribution state, which means basically that they're going to do something in equity, which means that it's going to be fair and not necessarily equal. Okay. So the process that Alabama follows is they end up getting a valuation of all the property that's involved in a marital estate.
Okay.
So they come to a figure on that, and then they basically pretty much are going to split that. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be equal, or if I paid for the entire price of this house that I'm going to get that house. The courts have power to end up basically making you sell or just get rid of any types of assets that are involved in that marital estate to satisfy that that principle of equity.
Talk for a minute, Jamie, just about what if there's a changed circumstance? Like I hear this a lot, and we see this a lot. You know, somebody says, I was making X dollars, now I'm making X minus $20,000. My circumstance changed, or I lost my job. Can they petition the court if there's a change in circumstance to help adjust, for example, either custody or child support obligations?
Yeah, you definitely can petition the court at any time to adjust that. Basically what happens is there is a divorce decree that's been entered, and like we were saying earlier, you have an uncontested divorce or a contested divorce, but the thing is that you end up coming to a settlement agreement, some type of agreement between the parties. And at that point, if that agreement isn't benefiting you or helping you, or there's a material change in your circumstance, you can petition the court, you can change it, and you just have to go in front of the court to petition that one section of the agreement between the two parties in order to better benefit you and maybe make it easier.
And I know you see this in your practice too. Are there circumstances where the ex-wife, ex-husband communicate with each other, they've got a positive moving forward relationship, where they work out some agreement on the side and then want the court to rubber stamp that? Do you see that at times?
You see that a lot. That happens a lot, and sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't work for long, and you still need to go back and readdress that issue. And I think that's pretty much the gist of what you're saying with that, is that at certain times you end up having to go back and just change things and put it in writing, because a lot of times an agreement that's just verbal doesn't stand up, because it might not necessarily keep continuing down the same path that you meant it to.
A question we've got here is, are there any obligations of parents if they are moving? So if a settlement has been reached and then somebody gets a job kind of out of town, moves out of state, what sort of obligations are there to work that out?
Well, you have to end up notifying the parent or the non-custodial parent that you are moving out of state. That you have 60 days, or you have 40 days, 45 days to end up telling them where you're going, and then that parent can object if they have a problem with that. And again, they file a petition with the court, and there's a whole process that they file with that. And then the court's going to hear evidence on that and make a determination if that move is in the best interest of the child.
We headed to break. Okay, good.
Let's go ahead. They just told me, let's go.
Okay, well, that's fine, because what I was going to say is I do want to unpackage that more, because I know that that's kind of an important issue. And I don't think people realize, David, that when there are changes in circumstance, you raised one of them through that question. I raised one earlier about a financial change. The court is really responsible for managing that issue and making a decision. I want to unwrap that a little bit more, because it goes much deeper than simply whether or not there's been a financial change or whether or not there's been someone that wants to move. A lot of times it does relate to whether the child is going to move from house to house, what age the child ages out of being under custody, a custodial relationship. So I want to unpackage that just a little bit when we get back.
All right, we'll step aside right here, our second and final break of the evening. If you want to join the conversation, you have a few minutes to do so. Pick up the phone and give us a call, or contact us, whichever way is most convenient for you. Stay tuned. We have more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Tyler Vail with the law firm of Hollis Wright. As with any industry, it's important in the legal world to hire an attorney that is knowledgeable and has a track record of success. But with so many attorneys out there and so many different types of cases, how does someone decide the right lawyer to hire? In this week's Legal 411, we're answering the question, what should I consider in hiring an attorney? In-state versus out-of-state, big firm or little firm, recommendations from friends or family, the internet, the phone book, or TV. With so many choices and so much information, it can be an overwhelming task trying to make the right decision. To complicate things, choosing a lawyer is an important and sometimes life-affecting decision and should not be taken lightly. So how do you select an attorney? Do your research. Look the firm up on the internet. Ask friends and family whether they know or have any experience with a specific firm. If you know any local lawyers, ask them about the reputation of the firms you may be considering. Call a local law office and ask if they are handling cases like yours. There's a good chance they can help you. But if they can't, they can always refer you to someone they respect who handles your type of case. And remember, ask questions face to face. Ask about their experience in handling cases like yours. How often someone from their office will be available to you, and what you can expect during the process. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
Welcome back into the attorneys. Our final segment is upon us. Attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by right now. So if you have a question and you've kind of thought about it throughout the show, time's running out, so pick up the phone and give them a call. Josh?
When we went to break, Jamie, I wanted to talk about, we had been talking about changes in circumstance, whether it's financial changes or geographic changes. Let's also talk about custody and kind of how that process works and how custody can be changed. Does Alabama follow some general standard or rule in Alabama that allows and kind of leads the guy, and maybe guides the judge in making his decisions?
Yeah, the courts follow something that's called the McClendon standard. It pretty much applies to any issue dealing with a child. So it has a couple different components to it. Basically, any type of change has to benefit the well-being of the child materially, and also the positive effect of whatever change it is, specifically in the context of custody, has to outweigh the negative disruption of moving the child from place to place. And also the parent making that application or trying to get the change, they have to be a fit custodian.
Okay. And so, a question we get a lot of times on these shows is, how long does a child have to be under a custody order? Is it when they leave the house, when they go to college? How does that work?
Well, when they reach the age of majority or just generally emancipate themselves. So generally when they reach college, that's when a lot of the obligations and the court structure comes off of them. In the context of child support, though, sometimes that will end up following them. Once the child reaches the age of majority, that obligation stops. But if there's any child support that hasn't been paid, that's in arrearages, is what we call it, that still continues to add up, and it still needs to be paid off.
That does address an issue I was going to ask you about. Child custody obligations don't just go away when you stop paying them. I mean, if you stop paying them, you can get in trouble, can't you?
You can. You can file a petition with court, and they can bring you in, and they can file civil and criminal contempt charges against you if you're not paying the child support that you're required to pay. And again, interest is going to tack on, and it's going to be a high amount of interest, and you want to stay ahead of those things. And if you start falling behind, that's something that you want to get an attorney to talk to about, because maybe there's something that you can do to kind of smooth things over and maybe make it a little bit easier on yourself.
What about decisions of the child? Let's assume the child's 11, 12 years old and says, look, I really want to live with my dad, I don't want to live with my mom. Under that circumstance, does the court consider and weigh those things?
The court does. When the child is a little bit older, the court takes more of what they're wanting to do and where they want to go into consideration. When the child is a little bit younger, they generally have a stance of wanting to keep the child with the mother. Okay. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the father can't end up coming away with custody of the child. But the younger the child, the more likely the court is to keep them with the mother.
What are the most common hold-up, bones of contention, really hotly contested topics and issues? I mean, we've kind of dealt with a couple probably, but are there any that we really haven't mentioned that you consistently see as issues?
Generally, the most hot button topics do deal with custody and just decisions with the children. A lot of times dealing with moving out of state, that really is the big one. Just moves. Schooling, that's another big one. General decisions on the day-to-day life of the child are pretty big.
How often is I'm just curious, how often is property, is that much of an issue?
As far as
divorce? Contention.
Yeah, property can be a pretty big issue. The real estate, that's generally the biggest thing, because that's the most expensive asset generally in the marriage.
You have advice on if you're about to go through a divorce, whether you should or should not move out of the house?
I think it depends on if it's a contentious divorce or a non-contentious divorce. If there's a situation where you have a good idea about who's going to be getting the marital home, it might be a good idea to get out of there. If you have a bad relationship, it might be a good idea to get out of there. It really depends on the individual relationship between the two parents at that point, or the two spouses at that point.
We got time for a grandparent question
real quick?
Real quick, grandparents, what's the status right now? Do they have rights?
Well,
because I know it's been back and forth.
It goes back and forth all the time. Generally, grandparents, as a general rule, they're as far as being like the custodian or visitation.
Just visitation, the ability to see and spend time with the child.
If it's going to benefit the child, the grandparents do have a right to the visit.
Okay.
But all in all, it's something that if there's a problem, or if they have like some issue with the parents, it's not anything that they can just go into court and automatically get.
15 seconds from the both of you. Jamie, you first. Just a final thought for our viewers tonight.
Dealing with marital problems is pretty hard, and it's something that there's a lot of emotion involved in it. There's a lot of tricky situations, and there's a lot of just tough legal things to kind of work your way through. So it's definitely something that you want to go find somebody that really knows what's going on, and somebody that's got some resources as a firm to go and help you, because it takes a lot of time to actually go through these.
Jamie, I'll leave it at that. I mean, he's right. You want to get counsel involved, whether it's child custody, whether it's divorce. You want to get a lawyer involved early, and make sure you got somebody to kind of lead you through the process.
That's great advice. Gentlemen, appreciate the advice, appreciate the time tonight. And as always, we thank you for watching as well as we wrap things up. If you still want to get in touch with the firm of Hollis Wright, here's how you can do so. Also, encourage you to find them on social media, both Facebook as well as Twitter. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.